Hello everyone, this is your friend from Naruto Audio Fanfics, and we are back once again with a brand new fanfic. Which is what if Naruto awakened a Byakugan-like bloodline and was claimed by the Hyuga, changing fate with Hinata, Hanabi, Sakura, Ino, Tenten, Tamari, Anko and Kurenai, Part 1. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to hit the like button, thumbs up, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing Naruto fanfics like this. So without wasting any more time, let's start today's fanfic. You think you know about Uzumaki Naruto? Guess again. Oh, sure, he is the son of the Yondaime, and yeah, he is a ninja, but what else do you know about him? Let me tell you, his story is an epic. To start at his birth would leave a small portion of his story out of the light. But to do so would leave him shrouded in mystery. The only people who know why Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked Konohagakure are the Yondaime, who died in the battle, the Kyuubi itself, and the gods. Contrary to popular belief, Kyuubi was not killed by the Yondaime. It was far too powerful to die, as it was an immortal being. Also, it was entirely impossible to seal it, even with the Shinigami helping the human. But, the massive influx of power along with the destruction of its physical body allowed the Kyuubi to achieve its dream, to become a god. Because these humans had helped it along the way, it left a passing gift for the child it was supposed to be sealed in. It had been impressed by the clan that called itself the Hyugas. Their bloodline limit was rather impressive, and they had managed to inflict a serious amount of damage to it. With a flick of its tail across the eyes of the crying child, she imparted a similar gift to him, along with the knowledge of what it did. How it would work, he would have to figure that out on his own. With that, the Kyuubi no Kitsune ascended into paradise to join the gods who have come before it. It made a vow to watch over this child, knowing it would lead an interesting life. 10 years later, Uzumaki Naruto was in pain. It wasn't nearly as bad as the beating he got from the villagers, nor the ache of a whole day of training. It was a burning. His eyes felt like they were on fire. It was like that time he had gotten pink eye, only a year ago. The epidemic had swept through the children of Konoha. Although it wasn't incredibly serious, there were some worried about blindness if it had gone untreated. Fortunately for many children, the eye drops used as treatment for the disease was in no short supply. His eyes burned like that. He could dimly make out a blurred outline of his dresser as he sat up. From the amount of light filtering through his curtains, it was morning. Naruto stood up and attempted to walk, only to find that his legs wouldn't hold his weight. With a loud thunk he hit the floor, unable to move. There was a sudden flash of light, and Naruto saw, the only way to describe it would be like seeing the dust floating in the sunlight, only it was a lot more there, almost like a stream moving through the air. With a groan, he fell into blackness. Hey! Naruto felt a hand on his shoulder. Come on, sleepyhead, wake up. With a start, Naruto jumped up, scooting backwards and away from the person who had touched him. It was a reflexive action from the repeated beatings he had received. Whoa! Slow down there. I'm not gonna hurt you. Naruto looked at his attacker. The loose clothing hid any definite physical features of this person. He couldn't figure out if it was a man or a woman. Its face was beautiful, but not definitely male or female. The robes were as well, with the colors neutral. However, the blood-red eyes that looked at him were very scary. Who are you? That's not important right now. I have to explain something to you. Where am I? The person sighed. You are in a dream. Now shut up and listen. Naruto instantly shut his open mouth. Good. Okay. You remember your history class, right? Naruto nodded. Good. You know that the Yondaime defeated the Kyuubi no Kitsune, right? Again, Naruto nodded. You were lied to. The shocked look on Naruto's face was priceless. What? What do you mean? The Yondaime attempted to seal it into a human child. You were that child. However, he failed, and the Kyuubi ascended. That's why the villagers hated you, because they believed that you were the Kyuubi, or that Kyuubi had taken over your body. But that's not true. I dare say, It will be a cold day in hell when a human gets the best of a demon lord. Naruto laughed at a mental picture of frozen flames. But, Kyuubi was impressed by their efforts. It gave you a gift. You now possess a bloodline limit that far surpasses all others. However, it is both a blessing and a curse. If you accept it, you will have the ability to see and manipulate energy, what you know as chakra. This means, not only will you be able to mold your enemy's chakra, but also the chakra of any living creature you can see. Unfortunately, this means that you must give up the ability to produce chakra in your body. This means that you will have to live off of other people's chakra, but you'll have a near infinite supply from the creatures around you. Now, you can choose now, accept this gift, or continue life without it. Naruto was dumbfounded. He had a choice. Few people ever gave him that luxury, even over inconsequential matters. But, here he sat, choosing between a bloodline limit, and a normal life, well, as normal as he could have. Sure, he was shocked that he was supposed to have been the container of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, but, somehow, it made sense, so he just accepted it. After a minute or so of weighing the pros and the cons, Naruto come to a decision. I've always wondered what it would be like to have a bloodline limit. I accept it. The person smiled and made a gesture. Naruto didn't know what that gesture meant, but apparently it made his eyes tingle. There you go, all set. Now, you have 1 week to learn a chakra transfer jutsu before your body stops making chakra. Oh, and before you wake up, be sure to tell that old codger the Sandaime to check the seal. He'll find it empty. Now, it's time to wake up. The world around him slowly faded. The person's voice slowly faded from a, wake up, wake up, wake up, to an, eent 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 eent, of Naruto's alarm clock. Groggily, he sat up and looked around. He pressed the button to shut off the alarm and stood up. His neck ached from the strange position he had fallen asleep in. The floor was definitely not comfortable. Naruto was definitely not a morning person. He was so tired he didn't notice the yellowish streams that floated in the air. Nor did he notice that the burning in his eyes that had been plaguing him for the past 3 days was, mysteriously, gone. He sluggishly made his way to his bathroom, where he stripped and stepped into the water. Forgetting that it wasn't instantly hot, he was immediately awake from the icy stream that hit him full in the face. After finishing his shower, he made his way back to his room, where he found some clean boxers and an orange jumpsuit that didn't have too many ramen stains on it. Before he left, he went to his mirror. Usually in the mornings, he would give his reflection a lecture on being strong and how he was going to become Hokage, but today he just stared. His usually shockingly blue eyes were different. They had faded to a pale blue that seemed almost white. All traces of a pupil had disappeared. Needless to say, Naruto was shocked. So, he did what came to his mind first. He screamed, and screamed, and screamed. He took a deep breath and started running down the street towards the Hokage tower, still screaming at the top of his lungs. Sandaime Hokage was just sitting down to a nice cup of coffee before the morning paperwork, when the doors to his office burst open. A screaming Naruto ran into the room. "Jason, my eyes hurt and now they're blue and scary and Kyuubi isn't sealed in my and I don't know what to do, please help me." Whoa, slow down, Naruto. Naruto hiccuped once and quieted down. In the excitement, Sandaime had spilled the coffee down his front and on several very important documents. Today isn't starting out well. Okay, Naruto, explain to me what happened. Naruto hiccuped again and started talking. He told Sandaime about how his eyes burned, about falling out of bed, about the dream, and about his new bloodline limit, and that he was supposed to tell him about the seal. Sandaime's face cycled through several emotions before he sat back and pinched the bridge of his nose. He could feel the headache coming on already. Naruto, come over here. Naruto walked around the desk and tried his hardest not to laugh at the brown stains on the front of the Hokage's white robes. Naruto, can I see the seal, please? Naruto looked confused for a moment before Sandaime pointed at Naruto's navel. With a nod, Naruto lifted up his shirt. The Sandaime went into a minor trance and let some chakra enter the seal. With a start, he realized that the seal, although full of chakra, was devoid of any and all consciousness. The chakra contained in the seal had been gleaned off the boy's own for years, which was the reasoning behind Naruto's incredible chakra levels. Naruto put his shirt down after Sandaime leaned back in his chair. So, Kyuubi was never sealed inside you. You're a lucky child. Naruto grinned his trademark grin while scratching the back of his head. However, Sandaime continued, I will have to have someone train you on how to use those eyes of yours. You said that it was inspired by the Byakugan and that it has much of the same effects, such as seeing chakra. Naruto nodded. What better person to train you than the owners of the original? The Sandaime snapped once, and a single Anbu materialized out of nowhere. I need you to bring Hyuga Hiyashi here. Tell him it's urgent, and it involves the secrets of the Byakugan. That should do the trick, but if it doesn't, tell him it's a direct order from me, and, if ignored, will be treated as treason. The Anbu nodded and melded into the background. Naruto was bored. He sat on one of the chairs in front of the Hokage's desk, wishing this Hyuga Hiyashi person would show up. The minutes passed. Finally, as Naruto was about to pull a prank he'd been thinking of, the doors to the Hokage's office burst open. An enraged Hyuga stormed in, babbling on and on almost incoherently. Naruto could only stare at the fury of the verbal barrage. The Hokage just sat there, smoking his pipe. Finally, the man shut up. Finished. Hi, Hokage-sama. Good. Now, it has come to my attention that a new bloodline limit has surfaced. Its effects appear to be eerily similar to that of the Byakugan. Due to the fact that many would kill to get their hands on the Byakugan itself, I'm sure they wouldn't stop at just taking its cousin. So, I have a request that is in your clan's favor. And that would be, Hokage-sama. Take the wielder of this new bloodline and teach him. Make him a part of the clan if you have to, but train him and keep him safe. And who would this person be? Sandaime pointed, and Hiyashi turned to face Naruto. The demon brat. Is this some sort of joke? It was then that he noticed the boy's eyes. They looked exactly like the Byakugan, except for the coloring. The Byakugan was actually a slight shade of violet, an extremely pale lavender. This boy's eyes had the same degree of paleness, only it was blue. Needless to say, he was stunned. A near replica of the Byakugan in the head of the most hated person in the village. He could only shudder at the repercussions against his clan's honor if they accepted him. But they must, if only to keep its secrets. Naruto looked on in amusement as the strange man's face turned several different colors before fading back to normal. Hiyashi turned to Sandaime and spoke. I will take him in, but I have one condition. Sandaime raised an eyebrow before saying, and that is, you publicly acknowledge the child as a human and dispel any and all rumors of him being a monster. Oh, that shouldn't be a problem. He never had Kyuubi sealed inside him anyway. Hiyashi paled, thinking that the Sandaime had just broken his own law and revealed the existence of Kyuubi to the child. Then, his ears caught up with his mind, and he heard the last part. What do you mean? Kyuubi was never sealed inside the boy. I saw the seal myself, I know it's there. Apparently, Kyuubi was too powerful to be sealed, and when his soul was ripped from his body, the influx of Yondaime's chakra caused it to transcend. In other words, it became a god. Hiyashi paled again. If Kyuubi had been powerful before, he shuddered. It appears that Kyuubi left a gift for Naruto when it left. Those eyes of his were it. Naruto told me that it spoke to him, and told him it was impressed with the Byakugan, and used it as a model for Naruto's own bloodline. That is quite some praise, coming from a former demon lord and a lesser god. Hiyashi smiled at the thought. Before he could let his mind wander, he jerked himself back to reality. I see. I'll see to it that the boy's belongings are fetched from his apartment. Is there anything else you need, Hokage-sama? No, Hiyashi, that is all. It appears that I am indebted to you. Should you need a favor, ask me, and I will do my best within the limits of my powers to see it accomplished. Sandaime grimaced at the horrible amount of political power he just placed in the hands of an already powerful clan head. But for Naruto, it was worth it. Then I shall be on my way. Hiashi turned to a now nervous Naruto. Come, child, I'll show you to your new house. And with that, Naruto found himself thrust into a new life with its own difficulties and advantages. Despite the drawbacks, it was better than what he had before, and he was content. Hiashi looked at the peaceful face of the sleeping child. It had been a long day for the boy. First, he woke up with different eyes, and then he was told he would be moving from his home and he would be living with complete strangers. On top of that, he had walked for nearly 3 hours on a tour of the Hyuga complex. Now, if all this torture wasn't enough, they threw out his orange jumpsuit and forced him to stand stock still for half an hour while they put this thing up next to him, apparently measuring his every proportion. Finally, they gave him a white t-shirt and a pair of off-white, almost cream-colored shorts, and escorted him to his room. Being tuckered out from this day's adventures, he instantly fell asleep. From what the Sandaime has told me, this child has led a tough life. It's rather obvious in his rambunctious behavior and his non-existent manners. However, as he will be living with us, he must learn manners so as not to bring shame on the Hyuga name. He has a long road ahead of him. I wish him luck. Excuse me, Hiashi-sama. Hiashi turned to look at the branch family member who was bowing politely to him. Yes, the council requests your presence immediately. Hiashi nodded and started walking away. He stopped and turned back to the branch family member. Watch the boy until nightfall. If he wakes, take him wherever he needs to go. And if he's hungry, take him to the kitchens and tell the cooks that he has my permission to have whatever he wants. Yes, Hiashi-sama. With that, Hiashi turned and continued his walking. Before he knew it, he was brooding. He wasn't even paying attention to where his feet were taking him. Before long, he found himself in front of the council chambers. With a sigh, he reached out and opened the door. Walking inside, he bowed politely to the assembled elders. After the formalities were out of the way, one of the council members spoke up. I am aware that one Uzumaki Naruto has been offered living quarters under your orders. Is this true? Yes, it is. Would you care to explain to us why the demon child is living in the Hyuga compound? Are you aware that his presence here mars the Hyuga name? Yes, I am aware of that. However, I have been informed by the Hokage-sama that the Kyuubi no Kitsune was never sealed inside the child. This has been confirmed by the Hokage-sama himself. Also, it appears that a bloodline limit has awoken in the child. Its appearance and its effects are eerily similar to that of the Byakugan, and it is believed to hold the same secrets. Therefore, in order to keep the secrets of the Hyuga secret, I have requested guardianship of the boy. One council member, who distinctly resembled a rat, buck teeth and everything, spoke up. You are aware that it is impossible to acquire guardianship over the boy. The Sandaime Hokage-sama had long ago emancipated the boy, giving him full citizenship and giving him full rights and privileges of an adult. Yes, I am aware of that. But, in order to keep the Byakugan exclusively in the Hyuga family, I wish, with the council's permission, to betroth my eldest daughter, Hyuga Hinata, to Uzumaki Naruto. If the council members were surprised, they didn't show it. A vote was taken. In the Hyuga council, votes are taken using beads. A white bead is a vote in favor of the subject, while a black bead is a vote against it. A bowl with 2 sections is passed around the table, and each member deposits a bead in its respective sides. White's on one side, black's on the other. When the bowl reaches the council leader, he counts the beads and then proclaims the results of the vote. Just like he was doing now. 25 votes in favor, 25 votes against the proposition. In the event of a tie, it is required that the council leader break the tie. His choice would change the future of the small boy who lay peacefully sleeping in his room, oblivious to the power this man held. The man held a clenched fist over the bowl. Everyone in the room waited, breath held. The man's hand slowly opened, and the bead he held in his hand dropped. It seemed to hang in mid-air just long enough for everyone to catch what color it was. The white bead landed amongst its fellow white-colored markers with a small clink. Hiyashi let out the breath he had been unconsciously holding. He smiled to himself, knowing that the secrets of the Byakugan were safe. The council leader stood. The vote has been passed, the deed is done. From this day on, Uzumaki Naruto will be known as Hyuga Naruto. He shall be given the status and privileges of a main branch member. Starting tomorrow, he is to be taught etiquette, poise, and the Jiyuken fighting style. He is to be refined into an honorable and polite main branch member. Anything short of perfection will be frowned upon. The council leader struck a small gong. This meeting is adjourned. Hiyashi smiled and thanked the council. Tomorrow would be a long day. Hyuga Naruto slept peacefully, unaware of what was to come. To say that Naruto slept well would be a massive understatement. It might have been the feather-soft bed he slept in, or the memory foam pillows. It could have been the silk sheets, or the goose-down blankets. It could have been that the sun wasn't shining through rips and tears in his curtain. No, it was that, for the first time in his life, Naruto felt safe. He no longer felt in danger of the villagers breaking into his house in the middle of the night and kidnap him, dragging him away to be tortured. With a yawn and a stretch, Naruto came fully awake. Just as he sat up, there was a small tapping on the door to his new room. Excuse the intrusion, Naruto-sama, but I have been requested to wake you. Naruto-sama, no one has ever called me that before. The door slid open, and an 11-year-old boy stepped into the room. He wore the typical white or cream-colored jacket that all Hyuga seemed to wear, along with black shorts. His right leg was bandaged down past his knee. He had black sandals. His hair was tied into a very loose ponytail. As he was a Hyuga, he had the supremely pale lavender eyes, but the coldness in them made Naruto cringe. My name is Hyuga Neji. I have been instructed by Hiyashi-sama to present you with two things. A letter and a new set of cloths. The boy held out a brown parcel in one hand and a scroll in the other. Naruto jumped out of bed and ran over to grab them with a small, "Thanks, Neji-san." Naruto ripped open the package haphazardly. He pulled out the cloths and hurriedly got dressed. When he finished, he looked at himself in the mirror. Naruto did a double take at the image he saw looking back at him. It was like he was a different person. He wore black sandals with a small white Hyuga insignia on the side. His black pants were neither too tight, nor too loose. He had a small section of white bandages underneath his kunai and shuriken holsters. The black shirt he wore was, much like his pants, neither too loose nor too tight. A small amount of fishnet could be seen around the loose collar and the short sleeves. He slipped on the pale cream-colored jacket. The design was exactly like his old orange and blue, only instead of red swirls, there was the Hyuga insignia, the burning flames. The majority of the jacket that had been orange before was now a pale cream, while the parts that had been blue were now a grayish color. His new outfit combined with his new eyes definitely made him look like a Hyuga. The only thing out of place was his shockingly bright blonde hair. Neji just stood there, looking at him impassively. Life really wasn't fair. This child was proclaimed to be an idiot and a demon, and now was a main branch member when the prodigy of the Hyuga was a branch family member. The coldness once again took his eyes. When Naruto finally finished ogling at himself, Neji spoke up. Hiyashi-sama had told me to tell you that you are not to attend the academy for the next week. You will be learning etiquette here for that time. After you have reached an acceptable level, you will once again attend the academy. After your days at the academy, you will return here to learn the Jiyuken style. In the meantime, before I escort you to your lessons, you are to read the letter. Naruto looked up in confusion, before spotting the scroll. He cracked the seal and read it. Dear Naruto, welcome to the Hyuga family. From this day onwards, your name is no longer Uzumaki Naruto, but will be Hyuga Naruto. You have been accepted into the Hyuga family as a main branch member. As such, you will act with the honor and courtesy required by your social status. As a Hyuga, you will be taught etiquette, manners, proper speech, and the basics of politics. Also, you will be instructed in the ways of the Jyuken. You will continue your courses at the Ninja Academy after you have reached an acceptable level of poise. You are to dress and act with dignity at all times. You are to conduct yourself as a Hyuga should. Any breaches of conduct will be dealt with severely. However, you will be granted an allowance of 10,000 ryu and I'm making 1 ryu equivalent to 1 yen, which is roughly equivalent to an American penny, per month. You will receive your first allowance after you complete your etiquette course. Again, I welcome you to the Hyuga family, and I hope you will enjoy your new life. Hyuga Hiyashi. Come, Naruto-sama. It would not do if you were late to your first lesson. Naruto looked up. He was trying to digest all this information. Thanks to how hectic yesterday was, he was more than accepting of this news. So, with a grin, he followed Neji to his first lessons. Naruto, Naruto-sama, pay attention. Naruto continued to stare into space. Man, this is boring, he though. A ruler slapped his wrist and Naruto was brought back into the real world. Naruto mumbled a string of rather strong curses under his breath, thinking his instructor wouldn't hear. He was wrong. Of course, his reward was another slap on the wrist. It still hurt nonetheless. Naruto-sama, if you want to continue living in the Hyuga manner, you must pay attention. Naruto nodded, and after a few minutes' diligence, started staring off into space again. The branch member sighed. I think it's time for a pop quiz. This brought Naruto back into reality. Neji-san, could you ask Hinata-sama if she would join us? Neji nodded and walked over to a slightly open door and slid it open to reveal the Hyuga heiress, red in the face, watching the lessons. Neji N. Ni-san H, how are y, you? Hinata-sama. Neji's voice was as cold as ice. Would you join us please? H. Hi. The shy girl stood up and walked over to Naruto and his instructor. Her posture was rather bad for the heiress of the strongest clan in Konohagakure. Her shoulders were slumped and she bent her back just a little bit in a slouch. Her movements were rather awkward, as she was just entering a growth spurt and was not used to the length of her limbs. She flashed a small, shy smile at the blonde boy. Her face was tinged a very noticeable pink, contrasting with her pale, creamy skin. No one knew that Hinata already knew Naruto. She had watched him during their time at the academy. She could name every prank he had ever pulled, as well as all the victims, whether it was a person or an object. Her hands instinctively came up to her chest, and her index fingers started pushing against each other, seemingly portraying her confidence fighting her shyness. Her shyness won every time. Hello, Naruto-san. The instructor spoke up. Now, Naruto-san, you must introduce yourself. And be sure to do it as I taught you. Konnichiwa. Boku no name wa yu, Hyuga Naruto desu. It's a pleasure to make your acquaintance. Konnichiwa, Naruto-san. Watashi no name wa Hyuga Hinata desu. It's a pleasure to meet you. I hope we may get along well. Naruto smiled and turned to his instructor. You did well, Naruto-san. Remember, when speaking to people of your own standing, use either sama, if you respect them, or san if you are unsure. You may only use kun or chan after you know them well. And it is considered very impolite to call someone ba-chan or jii-chan. Never do so unless you have known them for years and you are on very good terms with them. Now, you may go play with Hinata-sama for the rest of the day, if you see fit. Tomorrow, we will start table manners. Until then, Naruto-sama. With that, the branch family member stood and left. Neji was left to watch over the two. Anyo, Naruto-san, do you want to go play in the gardens? Sure Hinata-cha, I mean Hinata-san. Naruto stood up and grabbed her hand, dragging her behind him as he ran off in a random direction. After a moment, he stopped and looked back at the furiously blushing Hinata. Anyo, which way are the gardens? Hinata blushed and giggled a little. Take AL, left. Here, I'll show you. Naruto thanked the girl as she started walking at a rather brisk pace. They soon reached the gardens. The gardens were beyond beautiful. Naruto had never seen anything like them. The grass was cut a uniform length, and was completely even in thickness through the entire place. There was a small pond shaped like a dumbbell, 2 main pools connected by a channel. A small red bridge stood over the channel. Off to one side, there was a small shrine in the traditional Shinto style. Along the gravel paths that wandered through the immense flower beds were a myriad of stone statues. Some looked to be carved out of stone, other wood, and a few looked to be metal. There were even some that appeared to be solid gold. Near one side of the pond, a pile of stones had a small spring at the top. The water cascaded down the stones, creating an extremely relaxing trickling noise distantly similar to rainfall. Hinata giggled as she watched her crush. He was standing as he had been taught. His back was straight and his shoulders were back. His chest was thrust out slightly, but not so much as to appear arrogant. His posture conflicted greatly with his expression. Naruto wore his amazement like a banner that said, "Wow." Hinata was again pushing her fingers against each other. She was again having a mental battle. However, for the first time ever, her confidence won out, albeit barely. She reached out and grabbed his hand, leading him through the flower beds. As she talked, her stutter gradually lessened, and had almost disappeared by the time they had reached the shrine at the end of the path. Hiyashi sat in front of the shrine. He had lit some incense for his deceased brother's soul, much as he did every day. He still blamed himself for his brother's death, and Neji's cold demeanor. He was meditating as he usually did at this time of the day, when he heard voices. It was Naruto along with someone he didn't recognize. The voice sounded eerily similar to his daughter's, but it couldn't be hers. Hinata always stuttered horribly, and this girl showed almost no sign of such an impediment. Finally, the voices stopped, as their owners had rounded the bend to see Hiyashi sitting there in the lotus position, think Indian style. With a small eep, Hinata stopped in the middle of her sentence. Naruto grinned at the thought of being able to impress Hiyashi-sama with his newly learned manners. Konnichiwa, Hiyashi-sama. Genki desu ka. Genki desu, Naruto-san. It is good to see you have learned manners. I commend you in learning them to a decent level on your first day. Hiyashi opened his eyes and turned around. He was surprised that it was Hinata that had been with Naruto. The only surprise he showed was a raised eyebrow, and that was only for a moment. Hello, Hinata-chan. Are you doing well? Yes, father, I'm doing well. And why? I am well. I was so pleased that you had been speaking without stuttering for quite some time. Perhaps you should speak with Naruto-san more often. Perhaps he can help you get rid of it permanently. Yes, father. Perhaps you should spend the time between the end of your day at the academy and your training sessions in the evenings with him. It would be a great chance to get to know him, as well as to practice how to speak without stuttering. Naruto and Hinata aren't going to learn that they're engaged until they're 12 or 13 or something like that. In the meantime, Hiyashi continued, I believe it's time for you to get ready for your training session. After a few seconds of silence, as Naruto had finally learned not to speak unless he had something to say, Hinata said, Anyo, father, perhaps Naruto-san could accompany me to my training. Perhaps now would be a good time for him to learn the basics of Jiyuken. Hiyashi looked genuine surprise. Hinata actually asked for something. She rarely did that, and with the fact that she wasn't stuttering as much as she usually does when she asks for stuff, Hiyashi was now very glad he had taken in Naruto. He could already see the confidence growing in his little girl. Very well, Hinata. It is a good idea, provided Naruto can actually see the chakra holes. I will be attending a council meeting tonight, so I will not be able to train you. Tell your instructor to test Naruto. Now, I believe you need to find your training outfit. Hinata nodded. After a quick bow, which Naruto copied, she ran off to her rooms. Naruto was hot on her heels. Fortunately for the shy girl, Naruto had enough sense to stop outside of her room instead of barging in like he would have done 2 days ago. After Hinata changed, they ran off to one of the Hyuga training grounds. Soon, things became a routine for Naruto and Hinata. Their skills grew, along with Hinata's confidence. After Naruto completed his crash course in Manners 101, his mornings consisted of a stretch and a few laps around a training field. After that, he would shower, and meet Hinata and some of the other young Hyuga, including Neji, for a breakfast. Afterwards, Hinata, Naruto, and Neji left for the academy together. With Hinata's confidence growing, and Naruto finally getting quality instruction, they both grew into fine ninja trainees. Hinata was no longer considered weak, and her fighting was up to par with Hiyashi's expectations. Naruto grew extremely fast, and it became obvious he was a natural at Juyuken. His skills rivaled Neji's, and the 3 young ninja together could give Hiyashi quite a workout in their sparring. Before long, the days turned into weeks, the weeks into months, and the months into years. 2 years later, it was time for the Genin exams. A groggy Naruto rolled over in bed. He looked at the alarm clock sitting on the bedside table. It read 5:46 a.m. Naruto had woken up to thunder in the distance. As thunderstorms were rare in Konoha, all the light sleepers in the village were awake, Naruto included. To make matters worse, today was the team selection day. Naruto and Hinata had both aced the Genin exams, so were ready to be placed on a 3-man Genin team. Today was the day they would be selected. Naruto could only hope he would be on a team with Hinata. Naruto groaned and got out of bed. He threw on his cloths and went to meditate in the main gardens. It was the same ones Hinata had shown him 2 years ago. Hinata, for some reason, whenever Naruto thought about her, he felt a tightness in his chest. He didn't know what it was, but he knew that he liked her. She was his best friend. He had other friends, sure, but she was his first. The others at the academy had grown to be a lot nicer to him, but that was mostly due to the fact that the Sandaime had publicly announced the destruction of the Kyuubi, the fact it wasn't sealed inside Naruto, and also Naruto's legacy. The populace of Konoha was rather shocked that their scapegoat that they had treated like dirt for the first 10 years of his life was the son of their hero. That fact, coupled with the fact that he was now officially a Hyuga, Naruto was now very popular. Many people felt bad for how they had treated him, and many had asked for forgiveness. Naruto gladly gave it to them. It appeared that Naruto became just as popular as Uchiha Sasuke, and even had a following of his own. Recently, it appeared that the 2 clubs had combined into the Hyuga Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke fan club. Now, both of the boys had their own share of rabid fangirls, although Hinata's subtle glares and whispered threats kept them off of Naruto, at least when she was around. Naruto was snapped out of his mental ranting by light footsteps behind him. 2 silky smooth hands covered his already closed eyes, and a voice that made his heart skip a beat said, "Guess who?" Naruto instantly burst into a huge foxy grin. "Hinata-chan, I know it's you." A fit of giggling met his ears. "You're perceptive this morning, Naruto-kun." Hinata grabbed his arm and pulled him up. "Come on, let's go get some breakfast." After a rather refreshing breakfast and a shower afterwards, Naruto met up with Hinata at the front gates. Neji had already left to meet up with his team. Naruto still doesn't know how the green spandex could allow that Junin to sprout a clone, but he decided not to think about it too hard. The green spandex seemed to be a living thing, as did those things that sat over their eyebrows. "You ready to go?" Hinata nodded, and the pair took off to the academy. After dodging several groups of fangirls, accidentally knocking Sasuke from his tree into their waiting arms, and sprinting the last 100 yards to the academy entrance, they made their way to their homeroom. After a few minutes, Iruka-sensei entered the classroom. Okay, as you all are aware, today is the team selection day. Usually, the teams are selected by grade, taking the highest scoring students, the lowest scoring students, and someone from the middle to be on a team to balance it out. However, the Hokage-sama hand-picked the teams this year. Team 1. At this point, Naruto and Hinata were chatting in whispers in the back of the class. Sasuke was brooding, but Naruto and Hinata were trying to suppress laughter at the obvious signs of lipstick all over his face. Apparently, the girls had gotten the best of him today. 7. Hyuga Naruto, Hyuga Hinata, and Akamichi Choji. I repeat, Team 7, Hyuga Naruto, Hyuga Hinata, and Akamichi Choji. Your sensei is Morino Ibiki. Team 8, Haruno Sakura, Uchiha Sasuke, and Yamanaka Ino. Your sensei is Sarutobi Asuma. Team 9, Nara Shikamaru, Inazuka Kiba, and Aburame Shino. Your sensei is Uehi Kurenai. Team 10. Naruto and Hinata looked at each other and grinned. They were on a team together. And that concludes the team placement. You're now free to eat lunch, and I suggest you use this time to get to know your teammates. You're dismissed. Naruto and Hinata happily chatted with each other until they found their teammate. Naruto was the first to introduce himself. Hi, I'm Hyuga Naruto. Nice to meet you. Choji looked up. He had been devastated that he wasn't on the same team with Shikamaru, and even more so that he had been put with two of the most important people his age in Konoha. Hyuga Naruto was the son of the Yondaime, and had a yet unnamed bloodline, and Hyuga Hinata was the heir to the Hyuga clan, and one of the most eligible baccalaureate in Konoha. How could he even keep up with these two? They were two of the best in the class, and he was at the bottom. Hello, I'm Akamichi Choji. Nice to meet you. You're an Akamichi, aren't you? I'm Hyuga Hinata, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I'm glad you're on our team. That meat tank is a really powerful jutsu, and I can't wait to see it in action. Yeah, me either. Choji couldn't believe his ears. One of the strongest academy students and heir to the Hyuga clan had just complimented him. And on top of that, the son of the Yondaime was agreeing with her. Choji looked at the sky, expecting it to drop at any moment. Smiling, Choji felt that somehow, it wouldn't be as bad as he thought. Morino Ibiki was exited, almost as exited as when he has a few new pals to interrogate. Finally, I get to see if my theory is correct. It's gonna be hard for these genin, and if they come out of this sane, they'll be the strongest of the rookies. He chuckled at the thought. Sure, he would have to mentally and emotionally torture them to mold them into both a weapon and a human at the same time. Able to kill without emotion, but also able to have a social life and retain their sanity. This would be fun, but he would have to tread carefully. Ibiki found himself outside the academy. Time to pick up my victims, I mean my team. He made his way to where they were waiting. A small amount of chatter came floating through the slightly open door. Ibiki jerked open the door. The slam it made as it stopped its sliding made the entire room jump. Team 7, Naruto, Hinata, and Choji had been chatting quietly when the door slammed open. A rather intimidating man stood there. The high collar of the black trench coat ringed the man's neck, coming up almost to his ears. He had two parallel scars running diagonally down his face. Underneath his trench coat, he had a deep navy blue button-up shirt with its own collar hiding the man's neck. He wore his forehead protector like a bandana, covering the man's head completely, no hair showing. He wore nondescript black pants, and if he wore any shuriken or kunai holsters, it was hidden by his trench coat. His black combat boots replaced the usual sandals that most shinobi wore. The three on Team 7 jumped up and followed the intimidating man as he left. Not a word was spoken as they traveled to one of the training grounds. When they reached it, he stopped and turned to face them. My name, as you already know, is Morino Ibiki. I was the head interrogator of the Anbu Elite Ops up until a few days ago, where I transferred my position to my apprentice, Mitarashi Anko. I did so because I wanted to train a genin team. You three will be part of a 6-week specialized training program. Now, introduce yourselves, and tell me your likes, dislikes, hobbies, and dreams. Naruto nodded and spoke first. My name is Hyuga Naruto. I like ramen, training, and my close friends. I dislike people who judge before getting to know people. My hobbies are training and practicing using my bloodline limit and finding out new things about it and its abilities. My dreams, never really thought about it, but I guess it would be to become as strong as I can to hold up the Hyuga name and to protect my friends. Ibiki nodded. Next, you, he pointed at Choji. Choji stepped forwards. My name is Akamichi Choji. My likes are food and my friends. My dislikes are people who call me weight challenged. My hobbies are eating new foods, and my dreams are to become a strong ninja and a respected restaurant critic. Your turn, Ibiki says, pointing at Hinata. The shy girl looked down a little bit. She started playing with her fingers, but stopped with a look from Naruto. My name is Hyuga Hinata. My likes are training with Naruto-kun and learning new things. My dislikes are people who are mean for no reason. My hobbies are training with Naruto-kun and making medicinal ointments. My dreams for the future. The girl stopped there and blushed a deep crimson while staring at the ground. Good. Now, you can forget about all of that. The three genin looked up at the man as if he had sprouted an extra head. Starting tomorrow at 0600, you are to report here every day. From now on, you do not have names. You are Team 7. You will be called Alpha. He points at Naruto. You will be Beta. He points at Hinata. And you will be Charlie. His voice was harsh, loud, and crisp. Imagine a drill sergeant from any army movie, and you get the general idea of what he sounds like. From now on, you are not human. You are maggots. Impress me, and you will move up to dirt. Should you manage to make me believe you are worthy of becoming a Konoha shinobi, only then will you become human. You are not to sit, speak, think, breath, or even shit without my permission. You will address me as sir or sensei, as you see fit. Do you understand me? The three could only nod. When I ask you a question, you will respond either sir, yes sir, or sir, no sir. Do you understand me? Sir, yes sir. I can't hear you. Sir, yes sir. Not half bad, for maggots. Be here at 0600 tomorrow morning. If you are late, you will run laps around Konoha until I say stop. Understood. Sir. Yes sir. Good. Dismissed. Right when the three finally though they were free, Ibiki turned to them. Enjoy yourselves tonight. It will be the last chance you have in a long time. With that, the three took off running, genuinely scared of the man. Naruto was in hell. Only a week had passed since they had started training. When they got to the training grounds in the morning, they were told to run 25 laps around Konoha. When they were done, they did exercises like push-ups, sit-ups, jumping jacks, and a myriad of other strength training exercises. When they finished that, they were forced to run through a mile-long obstacle course which involved them dodging kunai and shuriken, crawling under and over barbed wire fences, forced to go through mud on their bellies, climbing ropes and ladders, and jumping down a 30-foot cliff before climbing back up and doing it again. On top of that, if they didn't finish the obstacle course in less than 3 minutes, they had to repeat the entire process, laps around Konoha and everything. On top of that, each time they failed, Ibiki put a jutsu over them that made a miniature storm cloud follow each recruit, constantly raining on them. Needless to say, they were miserable. Ibiki was a harsh sensei. He constantly yelled at them, throwing every single insult he could muster at them. If and when they retaliated, they were swiftly beaten and thrown to the ground. Then, because they rebelled, they started their regimen over from the start. It was brutal. It had been going on for a week straight, and by the time they finished at sundown, they were too tired to do anything but run home, shower, and go to sleep. However, at the moment, They were crawling through the mud under a series of barbed wire fences, and were forced to stay down, lest one of the myriad of kunai and shuriken that were flying overhead hit them. And to make it worse, Ibiki was throwing insults at them. You call yourself a shinobi. You're nothing but a tub of lard. I should have you split open and use your fat to butter my rolls. You are a disgrace to humanity. He leaned closer. Give up now, it'll make life so much easier on you. Poor Choji could only keep on crawling, oblivious to the tears that were streaming down his already mud-stained face. Ibiki turned to Hinata, leaving Choji to crawl out of the pit and run to the rope ladder and try to climb up. You are weak, aren't you, maggot? Answer me. Sir. Yes, sir. Hinata's voice was barely audible. I can't hear you. Sir. Yes, sir. That's better. Get your in gear and get out of my sight, maggot. Hinata started crawling faster in an attempt to get away from their instructor. He followed her progress through the course, and they finally reached the end. You maggots did better today, but you still didn't beat 3 minutes. Start your laps. Naruto groaned under his breath, fed up with the torture. Ibiki heard him, instantly rounding on the boy. Did I just hear you complaining? Sir. No, sir. I can't hear you. Sir. No, sir. Bullshit. Tell me what you think of your training. Sir. I love it, sir. I only wish the other graduates could enjoy it as I do, sir. Well, maggot, since you enjoy it so much, you can double all your exercises. That goes for your teammates too. Now get your asses in gear, maggots. The 3 trainees started running, internally grimacing at the 50 laps around Konoha they were facing. Not even training under Hiyashi-sama was this bad, Naruto thought. Flashback. Naruto stood in front of the Hyuga, cringing in fear. The man was glaring at the boy. Naruto was seemingly useless. He was clumsy, moved extremely slow, and couldn't seem to get even the basic stances right. You're worthless. I want you to go through all the kata I showed you until you can get them right, and at the same speed I showed you. Until then, you will not leave the training grounds. Naruto grimaced and started the most basic poses, gradually shifting through each strike and block before continuing to the next. Hiyashi just stood there, watching the boy, and striking each offending arm or leg that was out of position with his cane. Around dusk, Hiyashi left. The next morning, Hiyashi woke early and went to Naruto's room, expecting to have to drag the boy out of his bed. To his surprise, the bed hadn't been slept in. He went to the training grounds to see Naruto still there, running through each kata and stance. Hiyashi was rather surprised to see the boy still there and awake, but even more shocking was that he had each one perfectly down. Hiyashi smiled. At least he is dedicated. Hiyashi smiled at the boy, finally speaking, I see you got them all down. Naruto turned to look at the man. He could only smile before he collapsed onto the white sand that was the training terrain. Hiyashi called for a branch family member to pick up the boy and take him back to his rooms. That Naruto, he'll make a fine Hyuga and an even better husband for Hinata. End flashback. It was now the 3rd week. Hinata was panting with exertion as she climbed up the face of the cliff, using chakra to stick to the sides. She had been the first to figure this out, and with careful whispers, she had told the other 2 how to do it. She reached the top and back flipped off of it, gracefully turning in the air. She hit the ground running, jumping and dodging the kunai that were flying from behind trees as she sprinted the last 50 meters to the finish line. Naruto and Choji were only seconds behind her. They all crossed the finish line and turned to Ibiki-sensei. When he looked up from his stopwatch, they all snapped to attention, legs together and arms at their sides, head straight, shoulders back, chest out. You maggots did well today. You made it in less than 3 minutes. As a reward, I will now teach you some jutsu. Keep up the good work, and I'll teach you more each day. Hinata was glad that he wasn't going to be adding more weights. At the end of their first week, when they finally finished the obstacle course in less than 3 minutes, he had given them bracelets and anklets that were 50 pounds each, and a 100-pound flak jacket. Yes, it was an extreme amount, but soon they got over it and learned to walk normally. Soon, they grew accustomed to the weight, but they were back to square one. It took them another week and a half before today, finally finishing in less than 3 minutes. Today, we'll be learning a different jutsu each. Charlie, remember these seals. Ibiki flashed a series of seals at Choji before putting his hand next to his mouth in an O shape, blowing through it. A huge fireball exploded outwards, burning down several trees and scorching several others in the vicinity. That was Kaden. Gukaku no Jutsu. Each time you fail to create a fireball earns you a lap around Konoha and a run through the obstacle course. Sir. Yes, sir. Choji took a few steps to the side and started practicing his jutsu. Alpha. Front and center. Naruto stepped forwards, directly in front of Ibiki. The jutsu you'll be learning doesn't require any hand seals. However, it takes an immense amount of chakra, as well as near-perfect control to master. Gather the chakra in your palm. When your palm is glowing, thrust your hand forwards and release it in a cone shape. Be sure to let it explode outwards, like this. Ibiki thrust his hand outwards and a huge blast of blue chakra blew outwards in a roughly cone-like shape. It hit several trees, instantly vaporizing the places they hit, and scorching the ones that only took a glancing blow. Now, get practicing. Sir. Yes, sir. Beta. Hinata just looked straight at Ibiki walked up to her. He raised a hand, and a woman in a doctor's outfit walked into the clearing. This is Miho-san. You will be learning some advanced chakra control exercises as well as some medical jutsu. You will treat her with the same respect you show me. If I catch even a whisper of you not paying attention, you will run 500 laps around Konoha, regardless of the time it takes you to do so. Are we clear? Sir. Yes, sir. Good. Move out. Miho took Hinata and walked off to another clearing. Ibiki watched the progress of the other two, teaching them a new jutsu after they had mastered the previous one. And that became their routine. They did their laps, their exercises, the obstacle course, and then learned jutsu until dinner time. After they ate, they would return to the clearing to learn team strategy. By the time the 6 weeks were up, the three combined could take down Ibiki and leave him struggling to get untied from the tree they usually tied him to. He had even taught them a fair amount of psychology and interrogation techniques. This included a fair amount of genjutsu, so that aspect of their training was not left out. The last day of training had arrived. They were not meeting at the training grounds, as they usually did, but at a small sparring field, complete with bleachers and everything. The Hokage himself, as well as several council members were sitting there. It seemed that a fair amount of Junin and Chunin were also present. Today is your final day in training. You have each come a long way since you were first put under my leadership. The first part of your task is a fight. At these words, 3 tough-looking Chunin stood and walked onto the field. You must defeat these 3 using any means necessary. Kill if you must, but only as a last resort. Understood? Sir. Yes, sir. Good. Now, are both teams ready? Sir. Yes, sir. Let's just get this over with, the Chunin said. Begin. With a flash, Hinata dashed forwards. The Chunin all pulled out kunai and were about to jump her when she jumped to the side. Naruto's palm was glowing. With a thrust, he yelled, Chakra Blast no Jutsu. The Chunin could only throw up a hasty guard and use chakra to protect themselves at the last moment. They were still thrown back from the force of the blast. Doden. Doryu Taiga. The dirt underneath the Chunin turned into a mud river. Although the Chunin managed to twist in mid-air to land on their feet, the mud was thick enough to make them sink up to their knees and hold them there. Hake Rokuju Yansho. The world paused for a moment. Hinata took a deep breath, and slowly let it out. When the world finally started up again, her hands were a blur, striking each of the Chunin too quick for even most of the Junin to see. By the time she had finished her attack, she was on the other side of all 3 of the Chunin. The Doden Jutsu released itself and the Chunin fell. They struggled to stand, but they found their bodies unable to respond to their commands. It was over, and they knew it. Well done, Team 7. Fall in. The three genin lined up in front of Ibiki, standing at attention. About face. They smartly spun around to face the shocked onlookers. They were stunned that a group of genin had just bested 3 mid-level chunin. Several mouths were wide open, and everyone was staring. Ibiki decided it was time for the last test. Beta. 1 step forward. Hinata stepped forward. Kneel. Hinata was down on her knees. Alpha. Charlie, you two are ordered to kill your teammate. The tension could be felt as the two genin hesitated. Finally, Naruto spoke up. Sit. I cannot do that, sir. And just why not, maggot? This is a direct order. Sir, I refuse to kill my teammate, sir. Charlie, kill Beta and then take care of the traitor. Choji shook with rage. Sir, I cannot do that, sir. You two are a disgrace. I'll have you tried and executed for insubordination. You have one last chance. Kill them, sir. I refuse, sir. You. Pass. The entire crowd just gaped. A now smiling Ibiki just stood there, grinning at his students. Sir, what do you mean, sir? I mean you three pass. You pass the test. In our line of work, teamwork is stressed above all else. You three just proved that your teamwork could best some mid-level chunin, and you three stuck together, ignoring ridiculous orders, even if it meant your deaths. A person who doesn't follow the rules is trash, but those who abandon their teammates are worse trash. Remember that quote. Now, because you are no longer trainees, we are officially a genin team. From now on, you will no longer call me sir, but Ibiki-sensei. We will be taking missions from now on, although I hope you continue to train and grow stronger. The three genin, although they had been taught to stand at attention with no emotion, broke into grins. Ibiki walked in front of them and held out 3 objects. Here are your forehead protectors. Bear them with pride, for you are now Konoha shinobi. The 3 were overflowing with pride and happiness, now that their harsh training had been completed. They bowed deeply before taking their respective forehead protectors and wearing them how they saw fit. Hinata wore hers around her neck, loosely tied. Naruto wore his on his left leg, between the thigh and the knee. Choji wore his around his forehead, but did not split his hair down the middle. The 3 were grinning happily, finally able to wear them for the first time. Ibiki-san, I am impressed by the first batch of students. Ibiki turned and bowed to the Hokage. Should these 3 be able to live a decent social life on top of being shinobi, I will allow you to begin training some Junin on how to train the next batch of genin. If all of the next batch turn out as good as this one, I will make the Morino method standard for all academy graduates to participate in before becoming genin. I believe that a much more intense program should be used to train Junin for their special classes, such as Anbu or Hunter Nin, or Combat Specialist. I believe you are the man for the job. However, because you took on a genin team, you must see them through until one is a chunin and can take over as team leader. Report at my office at 8 o'clock tomorrow for your first batch of missions. Hi, Hokage-sama. Ibiki turned towards the genin once again. You 3 have the rest of the day off. I suggest getting back in contact with your friends. I'm sure you miss them. Oh, and one more thing. He reached into the pockets of his trench coat and pulls out 3 decently sized envelopes. This is the payment you 3 receive for completing an A- rank mission. Ibiki saw the confused look on his students' faces. Your training was considered an A-rank mission. You 3 participated in an experimental training program. That in itself is dangerous, but also you affected the outcome of the village. It appears that all shinobi will undergo this training before becoming genin. Now, go take some time off, you deserve it. Thank you, Ibiki-sensei, Naruto said. Come on, Hinata, Choji, it's time we visit Ichiraku's. You'll love it there. They serve the best ramen in all of Konoha. Ibiki smiled as his 3 students walked off. You 3 will become strong, and you'll go far. I wish you luck. The 3 freshly graduated genin were walking down the road, chatting happily. Of course, They were ecstatic that they had finally finished the brutal training program Ibiki-sensei had dreamt up. Thinking about it made them shudder, and they were sure they would for the rest of their lives. However, it did make them stronger. Far stronger than they had imagined it would. Hinata, although still shy when it came to people, was rather confident in her abilities on the battlefield. Although she no longer stuttered, she didn't slouch and slink around trying to avoid attention. She walked somewhat normally, although she still didn't like to start conversations. Once she was comfortable with someone's presence, she would chat normally with them. Choji was still somewhat big-boned, even after the program. However, underneath the fat, there was a layer of rock-hard muscles. Sure, he could still convert the fat into an instant burst of chakra, but it was supported by a large amount of stamina and slow-releasing chakra from his muscles. His fighting style benefited from the change, as he was much more agile now, both normally and in his meat tank attack. With the addition of the spikes, he could change direction at the blink of an eye, and would usually hit on the first or second try. Even if the opponent was good enough to dodge those attacks, he or she would be either immobilized by Hinata, or destroyed from a distance by Naruto, or most often a combination of the two. Choji's stamina is well complemented by the many jutsu he learned from Ibiki-sensei. He knew almost all of the Genin and Chunin level jutsu from all 5 elemental attacks, as well as a fair amount of the Junin level jutsu. He also knew a fair amount of special jutsu that didn't align to a certain element, such as Kage Bunshin and other such jutsu. Ibiki, nor many other shinobi for that matter, knew a lot of raw chakra attacks. Most of the ones Naruto had learned were from memories of the Kyuubi's attacks. Although they really didn't know the names of them, in truth they were just the molding and manipulation of raw power. However, Naruto had developed a number of original attacks, such as the Amatsu Tenshi no Senshu. Heavenly Angel's Bow, it basically created a rod of pure energy in one of Naruto's hands. Then, with a chakra string, he bent it and created an arrow of pure chakra. It worked a lot like a normal bow, but the arrow could do a myriad of things, such as explode on contact, or completely burn through an opponent. If he aimed the bow correctly, it could be used to knock out and even burn tenketsu. A burned tenketsu is like a chakra burn, but because of the damage, it is closed until it has healed. It requires a lot of chakra to use, as well as a rather decent spin to the chakra entering the tenketsu to do enough damage to burn it shut, making it almost impossible to use during close combat, making it impossible to use with Gyuken. Because of all this, Naruto has become very skilled as a long-range fighter, and as Ibiki-sensei had taught all of them Kage Bunshin, Naruto could create an entire army of chakra archers, making for a rather painful volley of well-aimed arrows. It was extremely deadly. Also, Naruto was the supplies officer for the team, meaning he used special sealing scrolls to seal away the large supply of food that was consumed between him and Choji. It saved both space and weight, and they could seal as much stuff as they had scrolls and ink without changing their weight too much. It also came useful for weapons and medical kits, and other such odds and ends. Putting the scrolls in plastic bags made them impervious to water, so they never had to worry about running out of supplies while on missions. Ibiki-sensei had really covered all the bases with his training. Despite their intimidating skills, the three had come out of the training relatively unscathed, mentally. Although they hated the training, and didn't like thinking about it, they were all much stronger because of it, and therefore they were glad they went through it. If they had the chance to go back in time to undo the training, they wouldn't stop it for all the money in Fire Country. Now, they knew that they were going to be accepting missions tomorrow, and were rather exited. But, they had tonight off, and due to Naruto's obsession with ramen, they were going to Ichiraku's. As they were nearing the stand, they, quite literally, ran into several rather grumpy people. Of course, no one from Team 7 fell down, but the other people weren't so lucky. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry," Naruto said, extending his hand down to help up the person who was sitting on the ground, rubbing her rather tender behind. "Watch where you're going, Dobi. The icy, yet apathetic voice that spoke was very familiar to Naruto. Ha! Who are you calling Dobi, Uchiha-san? Said Naruto, his voice having a rather stinging edge to it. As I recall, you were runner-up in the class rankings, beaten by, who was it again? Oh, that's right, it was me. I guess I'm just not so full of myself that I go about claiming to be superior to everyone else because I scored higher than them. The last Uchiha in Konohagakure, said to be the most cold-hearted shinobi in Konoha bested only by Ice Queen Kurenai, was livid. His face was a rather unhealthy shade of red, and several veins could be seen on his forehead and neck, sticking out rather painfully to everyone looking at him. You may be the last Uchiha, but you're still no Hyuga. Go off and play shinobi with the academy students. You're wasting my time. Come on, guys. With that, the three walked off. Choji, who had hated Sasuke because he was one of the kids that had teased him when he was young, just brushed past him, ignoring the genin. Hinata made a quick apology and left with a small bow, but as it was little more than the nodding of a head, it enraged Sasuke even more. Sakura and Ino were obviously torn between their two idols. Sure, most of the adults didn't trust Naruto, even after they learned he didn't have Kyuubi sealed inside of him and that he had been adopted and carried the full weight of the Hyuga name behind him, but most of the younger generation was a part of the Hyuga Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke fan club. To see both objects of their affections fight with each other was rather distressing. After a moment, the two girls started trying to soothe Sasuke's bruised ego and calm the boy down. Don't listen to him, Sasuke. You're better than him any day. Yeah, I bet he couldn't beat you in a fight if his life depended on it. How ironic those words would be. Sasuke just brushed them off, shaking his shoulder to remove their hands that had been set there, and walked off, hands in his pockets, brooding. I'll kill my brother, and when I'm done with him, you're next, Hyuga Naruto. With that, he walked off to go train. When Naruto, Hinata, and Choji rounded the corner, they burst out laughing. Uchiha Sasuke, although popular amongst most of the girls, save for Hinata, was not very well liked by the younger generation. He was coddled by the adults, and merely tolerated by his peers. His rather stinging remarks, when he spoke at all, were not taken kindly by their targets. Nice one, Naruto. You really handed it to him on a silver platter. Choji said, with a large grin. Naruto-kun, you play the part of a stuck-up Hyuga almost as good as Neji Ni-san. Although, I'm glad that you don't have a stick-up ear, like he does, Hinata said, with a small giggle. Yeah, and that Sasuke is even worse. He doesn't just have a stick-up his, he's got an icicle. Always trying to outdo everyone, and I don't think even Neji-san would even go that far. Choji said, with a rather evil chuckle. Thanks, guys. I don't know what came over me. It was bad enough he thinks he's better than everyone else, but to call me a Dobi when he scored lower than me. That just blew me over the edge. Anyway, there's Ichiraku's. Let's go. As they walked under the flaps to enter the small stand, they saw 3 of the stools were already occupied. Hey, Shikamaru. Long time, no see. Choji said. Shikamaru turned on his stool and stood. He was surprised when Choji enveloped him in a friendly bear hug. Ack, Choji, you're squishing me. Oh, sorry. Choji set him gently back down to the ground, and Shikamaru stumbled slightly after being let go. Troublesome, when did you get this strong? Shikamaru, the laziest ninja in Konoha, had an interested expression on his face. Kiba turned around to face the 3 newcomers. Yeah, how did that special training go under that madman, Ikibi or whatever his name is? Bark. Akamaru was sitting in Kiba's jacket. He seemed to bark each time as an interjection to Kiba's outbursts. A small amount of killer intent came off Naruto as he spoke. His name is Ibiki, don't get it wrong again. He's a better sensei than you'll ever have, even if his training method is rather unorthodox. Kiba wilted under Naruto's glare, and Akamaru whimpered slightly. His eyes were as intimidating as the Hyugas in full Byakugan, although Naruto never got the veins and his eyes were always active. He softened and gave Akamaru a little pat. Nice to see you again, Akamaru. How's Kiba treating you? Akamaru barked once and would have been shaking his tail, if he wasn't in Kiba's jacket. He said he's doing fine, and I'm treating him well. You should see how strong he's getting. TCH, troublesome, Shikamaru said, turning back to his bowl to eat. I would like to know how far you three have progressed as well. Naruto raised an eyebrow. Shino, you have a voice. They all face vaulted and Naruto laughed. Hey, sorry, couldn't resist. Yes, he has a voice, and I bet he could take you easily. Shouted out a rather pissed Kiba. Bark. Growl. Again, Akamaru interjected. Well, then maybe we should do some sparring. We have the rest of the day off, and after dinner, I'd be glad to mop the floor with you, I mean spar with you. They all sweat dropped. Anyway, I'm still hungry. Let's get some food. I'll have 1 pork ramen, 3 shrimp ramen, 2 beef, and a chicken to round it off. All deluxe sized. Coming right up, said a grinning Ayame as she prepared the bowls for their #1 customer. Anyo, I'll have a shrimp ramen. And I'd like 6 barbecue pork and 3 barbecue beef ramen please. Choji could eat as much as Naruto when it came to ramen. The other team's sweat dropped at all the food that had been ordered. Hinata-chan, do they always eat this much? Asked a curious Kiba. I'm afraid do. At least they eat with some manners, instead of choking it down as fast as possible. Indeed, Naruto and Choji were eating with a fair amount of manners. They gracefully lifted the noodles, allowing them to cool for a moment, before dipping them into the steaming broth before gracefully consuming them. Naruto had eaten like this since his adoption into the Hyuga, but Choji used to be a wild and rather rude eater, slurping and gobbling the food down as fast as possible. It appeared that the bonding time, during the week-long survival training in the woods with Ibiki sensei had allowed the Hyuga to pass down their manners to their large friend. After Hinata had finished her bowl, she chatted nonchalantly with Kiba, Shino, and Shikamaru while Naruto and Choji listened while finishing their ramen. After the two finished, they joined in the conversation, and eventually the talk drifted to missions. So, Shikamaru, Naruto started, what kind of missions have you been doing since you graduated? Shikamaru tilted his head back and rubbed his temples with one hand, it covering his eyes in the process. So troublesome. Naruto raised an eyebrow at his behavior. They suck, yelled Kiba. All these D-rank missions are nothing more than shit jobs. What does catching the daimyo's cat and babysitting have to do with being a ninja? For Kami-sama Sake, the academy students should have these missions, not genin. I'm more than ready for a challenge. Bark. Akamaru sounded both pissed and annoyed at the same time, pretty good for a dog. I agree with Kiba, said Shino, and for the first time ever, the collected group actually saw him bristling with anger and annoyance. He noticed them staring at him. What? Nothing, they all said in unison, finding various objects around them suddenly incredibly interesting. Who knew that salt shakers and the back of a Yame's head could be so interesting? After a moment of awkward silence, Naruto stood up and pulled out his wallet, paying for his ramen and leaving a decent tip. Well, it's getting late, so if we're going to be doing some sparring, we should get going. Yes. Choji and Kiba shouted in unison, eager to test their abilities. Troublesome, Shikamaru said. Hinata and Shino just stayed silent, following Naruto as he got up, walking off to the training ground. After a half hour, enough time for Naruto and Choji to digest their food intake without worrying about vomiting during the exercises, they arrived at a training field. Before we start, we should all do some stretches and some warm-ups. Hinata may be a good medic nin, but we still don't need to be pulling a muscle or tearing a tendon because we were careless. Even Shikamaru, with a small, troublesome, joined the group in stretching and doing some laps around the training field. As they were not looking for an intruder or an observer, No one noticed that Sasuke had taken up a position in a tree with a pair of binoculars to watch the action. He had been brooding on top of a roof as the group went by, and had decided to follow them when he heard Kiba shouting out challenges to everyone, exited at the prospect of sparring with them. He had dashed home to grab his binoculars after finding out where they were sparring. He had arrived back in time to see them finishing up their last couple of laps. Okay, how should we do this? Surprisingly, it was Shino who spoke up. We should go one-on-one fights. As a team, we are specialized for hunting and retrieving, not combat. We, as a team, only have the advantage with our surprise attacks. Naruto nodded before pulling out a scroll, and after looking through it, he palmed a set of kanji. With a small puff of smoke, a board game puffed into existence. They all sweat dropped. Oi, Naruto, what's the game for? Shouted Kiba. I don't want the game, I want the dice. Naruto pulled out the dice and gave one to each person. Okay, this is how it'll work. The lowest rollers from each team will fight each other, as will the high rollers. The two left will fight each other also. Any objections? Troublesome, but I think some rules should be placed down. 1. No killing blows. 2. If the fight is getting out of hand, those not fighting will stop it. And 3. No weapons. I don't know if Hinata can heal a pierced jugular from a slipped hand or a botched dodge. We don't need to be killing each other. Everyone either nodded or voiced their opinion, and Kiba did so rather loudly. Good. Then let's roll. Everyone took their dice and shook it in their hands. San, Ni, Ichi, go. Naruto counted down. After saying go, everyone dropped their dice onto the ground, careful to track theirs and not get someone else's. The matchups were Choji vs. Kiba first, Hinata vs. Shino second, and Naruto vs. Shikamaru third. Okay, Choji, Kiba, get ready. I'll act as judge. When I call the fight, you both stop instantly, got it? Troublesome, Shikamaru said. The two fighters nodded and walked out a ways, facing each other with glares. I'm gonna kick your fatty. Choji only grinned, used to being called names so much that it didn't matter to him anymore. Begin. Kiba shouted some random insults, and Akamaru jumped on Kiba's back. Jujin Bunshin, he shouted after a few hand seals. A puff of smoke later, and two rather feral-looking Kibas appeared, one on the other's back. Let's go Akamaru. They both took off at incredible speeds at Choji. A series of hand seals that were difficult to follow because they were so quickly executed brought out one of Choji's favorite jutsu. Doden. Shinju Zanshu no Jutsu. Choji sank into the ground before Kiba could reach him. Kiba and Akamaru stopped, sniffing the air. Their efforts were futile, as Choji was walking through the earth as easily as on top of it, and his scent couldn't be followed. Suddenly, a large mud dragon rose from in front of the boy and his dog, flying directly at them. They dodged in either direction as the dragon impacted the dirt beneath them. The mud washed over Kiba's legs up to and over his knees, effectively trapping him in the bog-like goo. Akamaru was buried up to his neck. Choji jumped out of the ground, and as he was landed, he finished a bunch of hand seals, calling out, Kaden. Hausenka no Jutsu. The fireballs he spat out impacted the area around the ninja and his dog. Ha! Your aim is so bad you couldn't even hit us. Kiba yelled. Choji just landed and smiled. Try getting out, Choji said. Kiba looked down and saw that the dirt around him had been solidified, and was nearly impossible to get out of. Akamaru could only whimper as he was stuck. Winner, Choji, said a slightly surprised Shikamaru. Choji grinned and sank into the dirt once again, only to pull Kiba and Akamaru under and pull them back up to the surface. Kiba looked crestfallen. Choji reached his hand out. Kiba slowly moved his hand into Choji's, and the shook. Good fight, Kiba. Thanks, Choji. Okay, Hinata vs. Shino. Get ready. Naruto shouted, eager to get to the next match. The two fighters walked out to the middle of the field and nodded at each other. Hinata fell into her Jiyuken stance, while Shino just stood there. Begin. Hinata rushed at Shino, who just stood there. Hinata's hands were a blur as they flew out and struck several parts of Shino's body, flashes of chakra flying out his back. Hinata jumped away after noticing several hundred bugs trying to crawl up her leg. Shino just stood there, casually stretching his arms and legs, showing the Hyuga heiress that he was unaffected by her attack. What? How? Asked Hinata. Your attacks are chakra-based attacks. My Kikai bugs eat chakra. It's a simple matter of them coating my body and eating the chakra that would otherwise close my tenketsu. Hinata suddenly felt weak. With a blast of chakra and a spin, she activated the Kaden to remove the bugs from her back. Jumping after she finished, she used several decent acrobatic moves to jump away. She made the familiar cross seal and said, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. Several Hinatas appeared, each one taking up a position around Shino. His bugs managed to crawl up one and after absorbing all the chakra in the clone, it dissipated. Hinata and her clones charged after the poof of the clone, throwing a myriad of Jiyuken attacks, as well as using a fist for several of the attacks, changing between physical and chakra attacks to keep Shino guessing. After a few moments, Hinata jumped back and her clones dissipated. Shino fell down to his knees, and slowly fell face down onto the ground. Hinata stood back and relaxed as her opponent was down. Shino suddenly became a mass of bugs, which rose up in a wave and flew at Hinata, who jumped back and tried to dodge the attacks, only to run into the real Shino behind her. She spun around and attacked him. Surprisingly, Shino was decent at taijutsu, and managed to either block or dodge most attacks. By the time Shino was ready to collapse, the bugs had reached Hinata and started draining chakra. They both struggled to stay conscious, but failed, and collapsed at the same time. I guess it's a tie then. Naruto ran out to Hinata and started shaking her as Shino's bugs withdrew into their host's body. Oi, Hinata, wake up. He pulled out a soldier pill and stuck it in her mouth. She involuntarily swallowed. After a few seconds, the pill took effect, and her eyes flew open. She sat up suddenly and looked around. Naruto had just deposited another soldier pill into Shino's slightly open mouth. Naruto-kun, what happened? Anyo, you were sparring with Shino, and you tied. You both passed out at the same time. You were great. You kept him guessing the whole time. Hinata blushed slightly. Thank you, Naruto-kun. Shino woke and stood up, walking back to the sidelines. Hinata just sat there, staring into Naruto's eyes. So much like mine, but so different, her thoughts eventually turned to other things. She blushed more. Naruto stood up and grabbed her hand, helping her to her feet. Thank you, Naruto-kun. No problem, Hinata-chan. He called me Hinata-chan. Hinata blushed even more and almost fainted before she reached the others, finally coming to her senses as Kiba yelled, Wow, great fight, Hinata. I've never seen anyone move so fast. You were awesome. Thanks, Kiba-san. You did well, Shino-san. Very clever use of a Bunshin hybrid. I thought it was you, but it really kept me guessing when it turned into a mass of bugs. You're very good. Thank you, Hinata-san. You did very well yourself. So troublesome, I guess it's time for our fight, Naruto. Yeah, I guess so, you ready? Troublesome. They walked out to the middle of the field. Hinata decided to play the role of judge in place of Shikamaru, as he was now fighting. Sasuke, still unnoticed by everyone, looked on with anticipation. Time to see your abilities, Naruto Baka. Naruto took up a Jiyuken stance, only where his outstretched hand should have been sideways, it was held much more like Rock Lee's. His back hand was held normally, and his weight was shifted backwards. Ready. TCH, troublesome, whenever you are. Naruto didn't notice that the shadows under Shikamaru were already stretching out to him. Begin. With that, Shikamaru's shadow touched Naruto's, who was now completely immobile. Kajimane successful. Shikamaru reached into a pouch and pulled out several shuriken. This was the normal shadow bind, not shadow imitation, so Naruto didn't move at all. With a flick of his wrist, Shikamaru threw the shuriken at Naruto, doing several hand seals along the way. Cage Shuriken no Jutsu. The 3 shuriken multiplied into 16 shuriken. Naruto's eyes widened as they impacted. Poof. The shadow clone burst into smoke. Nani? You think I'd fall for that? You underestimated me. Naruto's voice seemed to come from both everywhere and nowhere at the same time. It unnerved the group, and Shikamaru most of all. Now, let's end this. Amatsu Tenshi no Senshu, Yaseisha. Dozens upon dozens of blue chakra arrows burst into the field from the woods all around them. They came from every direction and in such numbers that even as Shikamaru dodged the first ones, he fell directly into the patch of the next group. The arrows dissipated as they struck the shadow user, each one hitting like a punch. Needless to say, Shikamaru was hurting after that attack. He fell onto his knee as a final arrow came flying out of the undergrowth. Jinjifusei no Ya, knockout arrow. The arrow struck Shikamaru on the forehead. He instantly passed out. Sasuke had been watching the entire fight, and was surprised when several Naruto clones appeared underneath the tree he was sitting in. He was even more surprised when they both reached out their right hands and produced a large pull of chakra. Then, a chakra string attached itself to either end of the pull and pulled taunt, creating a bow made entirely out of chakra. Sasuke was amazed. It would take incredible chakra control to make this. He almost fell out of the tree when each Naruto clone pulled the chakra strings back, and a blue chakra arrow appeared by their hands in the correct position. Each Naruto released the arrow and they sped out to their intended target, Shikamaru. Sasuke looked through the binoculars again just in time to see Shikamaru get hit from all sides by a large amount of these chakra arrows. Then, finally, one last arrow hit him in the forehead, and Shikamaru dropped. Sasuke could only stand there. Naruto had used clones to make an attack that would require an incredibly large amount of chakra as well as the control needed to shape and shoot the bow. Damn it. He's already so strong. I need to work harder to surpass him. If I can surpass Naruto, I can beat my brother. The clones dissipated, and Sasuke jumped down and walked back to town, hands in his pockets, brooding as usual. He didn't even notice when Ino and Sakura threw themselves unabashedly at him, completely brushing off the 2 fangirls. He had a lot of training to do. Kuso, stay up, damn it. Uchiha Itachi, one of the strongest men in the world, second most powerful man in the feared organization Akatsuki, couldn't seem to get his hair right. Usually his locks of jet black hair fell in the perfect Uchiha form. Today, however, it was limp and lacked its usual luster. It looked more like the hair of Maida Guy, but without the shine and a lot longer, and it seemed that no amount of hair care products could manage to conform it to its usual style. Kuso, he said softly. Kisame, Itachi's usual partner in crime, slammed open the door to the small bathroom that the 2 shared in their small apartment given to them in the Akatsuki base. Damn it, Itachi, quit playing with your hair and go to your meeting with the leader. He's waiting. His voice dropped from its almost shout to a grumbling undertone. Geez, he's worse than a girl. I heard that, shark-skinned bastard. Shut up and get going. Geez, if I didn't know better, I'd think you were a girl. You certainly squealed like one last night. Shut up. Okay, geez. Just get your in gear. You know how irritable leader can be in the morning. Okay, fine. Itachi walked out of the bathroom to grab his black cloak with the red cloud pattern on it from the floor, where it had been tossed unceremoniously last night before jumping, quite literally, into bed with Kisame. Downtime sure was fun. He shook his head to clear away thoughts of his partner for the last few years. Calming himself, he strapped on his cloak and strode down the nearly empty hallway on the way to the throne room. He finally reached his destination, only 5 minutes late. Itachi, you're late, said the nearly imperceptible voice. Yes, I had business to take care of. No matter. I called you here for a solo mission. Itachi mentally cursed, knowing it would mean less downtime. I need you to investigate a rumor that has been floating around for quite some time. It has recently come to my attention that the Kyuubi no Kitsune had ascended after the fight with the Yondaime and was never really sealed into its container. I need you to travel to Konoha to confirm or disprove this rumor. You have 2 weeks to finish your mission. I suggest you wear something other than our preferred garments. Hi. Be gone by noon. Hi. And with that, Itachi did the famous Uchiha brooding walk no jutsu all the way back to his rooms. Finally, after packing all 3 of his outfits that weren't black with red clouds, he bid farewell to Kisame and walked to the exit of their lair. As he approached the guards to get them to open the gates to the world, one stopped him. I need to see your papers, Itachi-sama. Itachi held them out to the man, wondering why they were on the verge of bursting into laughter. Everything is in order. Itachi turned to exit the base when another of the guards stopped him. Anyo, excuse me, Itachi-sama, but you have something on your chin. Itachi wiped his hand over his chin, indeed feeling something on it. He pulled it away and flushed in embarrassment at the sticky opalescent liquid as he quickly wiped it off with a handkerchief. By now, the guards had fallen on their asses with laughter as Itachi turned a red that would rival Hinata, although he didn't know this at the time. Thank you, he said with barely contained rage in his voice. He was pondering what sort of punishment he should dish out to the guards via Mangekyo Sharingan, but before he could decide, the gates were open and he was on his way. Itachi finally made it to within sight of the gates of Konoha. Not wanting to risk getting caught, he used a genjutsu to hide his chakra and make himself invisible to the eye. He turned himself into a rock and waited for a wagon to pass over him on its way to Konoha. When one finally came, he stuck himself to the bottom of it with chakra and waited for it to enter. 2 hours later, he was wandering the streets, looking for the entire world to be a normal civilian. Unfortunately for him, he just happened to be standing in the road of a stampede of girls. As Uchiha Sasuke danced his way through the crowd, most of them parted to the side to avoid being run over. Itachi, unaware of the dangers of rabid fangirls, just stood there as Sasuke darted around him, unaware he was dodging out of the way of his hated brother. Itachi turned around just in time to see several very rabid girls send him flying with a combination of punches and kicks, pissed that anyone could get in between them and their beloved Sasuke. Itachi could only think one thing as he flew through the air. I feel so sorry for you, brother. As fate would have it, when he finally crash-landed and skidded to a stop, he had managed to land in the middle of one of the few candy stores in Konoha. Shaking his head and slowly standing, he checked himself for injuries. The worst was a bruise on his cheek and his shredded pride. Welcome. Itachi looked up into the nicely plump woman who stood at the counter. He nodded and proceeded to look around the store, not wanting to draw unnecessary attention. His eyes fell on a strangely small cardboard box, its bright red background featuring white letters that read, Pocky, and a picture of a chocolate-dipped wafer stick. Curious, Itachi picked up the box, not knowing that this act would change his life forever. He went to the register and bought the box, casually opening it and trying one of the sticks. He instantly fainted. Waking up, he looked at the box in his hands. Surely, I have found my purpose in life. I shall eat this sweet ambrosia of the gods. Needless to say, he was instantly addicted. Walking out of the candy store, he was a rather strange sight to behold. Each and every pocket he had, as well as his backpack, was full to the brim of various flavors of Pocky, even some of the less popular ones. He had the usual chocolate and strawberry, but he also had a rare pina colada, the rapidly becoming popular mango, and even an extra special ultra-hot cinnamon. Itachi slowly wandered through the streets, munching box after box of his adored bonbon. Suddenly, a strange scene caught his eyes. 2 people who looked like exact clones of each other, save for height, build, and one flak jacket, stood in the middle of the street. They were wearing hideously green spandex suits that conformed to every curve of their bodies. Also, they had burnt umber, things around their ankles. Their bowl cuts were a crime of fashion, but nothing could have prepared Itachi for what he saw next. Above their eyes were two things. They were thick, hairy, and twitched every once in a while, even if the owners of the faces they resided on were completely still. Curiosity took over as Itachi walked forwards, chewing another stick of double fudge chocolate Pocky. The taller of the strange duo stopped hugging his shorter clone to stare at the strange man who approached him. Itachi carefully extended a finger, slowly moving it closer and closer to the man's face. He poked the apparently incredibly fuzzy eyebrows. A mouth randomly formed from the hair and attempted to bite Itachi's finger off. Incredibly, Uchiha Itachi, one of the most feared people in the world, screamed like a little girl and dropped where he stood, utterly unconscious. Itachi slowly opened his eyes, blinking them to adjust to the noontime sun that shone down into his face. He slowly sat up to see himself in one of Konoha's many training grounds. The green-clad duo stood in front of the training stumps, alternately hitting or kicking them. They seemed to notice Itachi's awakening. Guy-sensei, the flames of youth burn brightly in this one. The last person who fainted in front of us was out for weeks. Indeed, my beloved and cute pupil. We shall celebrate his springtime of youth with a manly embrace. Yosh, Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Guy-sensei. Lee. Itachi just stood there, staring as a setting sun shone behind the walking fashion disasters as they, manly embraced, while crying into each other's shoulders. Putting his hands together in the Kai seal, he let the small genjutsu disrupting technique do its magic. Nothing happened. The sunset stayed, the waves continued to crash, and the rocks underneath the two were still as hard as usual. Itachi was spellbound. He couldn't believe the incredible amount of skill that was put into this genjutsu. He activated his Sharingan, with a small genjutsu of his own to hide the changing eye colors. Nothing. The Sharingan told him that there wasn't a genjutsu there, and the scene was real. How in the world they could have summoned a seaside sunset scene at noon in the middle of a continent, no one could ever know, but Itachi was determined to find out. He pulled out a notebook and sat there, scribbling down notes left and right, describing each scene as it came to play with as much detail as he could. For the rest of the day, Itachi followed the duo around town, even as they ran laps around Konoha on their hands. By the end of the day, his notebook was full, his Pocky was gone, and his wallet was itching to go buy more of his heavenly snack. So, after one last trip to the candy store, he found a nice tree to sleep in, and started drifting off. The last thing he though was, somehow, I get the feeling I'm forgetting something. Naruto was getting his pack ready. After nearly a month straight of D-rank missions, the team was bored out of their minds. Finally, Naruto snapped and requested a much more challenging mission from the Hokage. Flashback. The three genin and their sensei sat in front of the Hokage's bureau. Naruto, despite having been coached by the Hyuga to remain impassive at all times, had a strange twitch in his eyebrow that he couldn't manage to get rid of. Just the mention of the daimyo's cat seemed to aggravate his condition. It didn't help that the subject of their conversation with the Hokage was that particular problem. Wife's cat has escaped again. It was last seen in the vicinity of the Hokage monument lookout point. Excuse my interruption, Hokage-sama, Naruto said. But I believe that at the rate we have been accomplishing our missions would leave few or none for the other genin teams. That would be both unjust and anti-productive. Is there, by any chance, a mission that would be a bit more of a challenge for us? Sandaime Hokage raised an eyebrow at Naruto's behavior. His manners certainly have improved since he started living at the Hyuga compound. I'm sorry to say that the last low C-ranked mission was just given to Team 8. It was then that the gods decided to pity the plight of Team 7 and arranged for their wish to be granted. The door to the Hokage's office burst open and a Junin ran up to the Hokage's desk to hand him a sealed scroll. Hokage-sama, we have received word from one of the Chunin border patrol teams. The team in charge of Sector 15 on the border of Fire and Rice countries had suffered a casualty. They send a report via summoned hawk, and their report is in here. With that, the man bowed and walked out, closing the doors behind him. The Hokage opened the scroll and read the report. Although he held his face in a sort of apathy, the look in his eyes seemed to tell both Naruto and Hinata, who have been trained in the Hyuga way of reading emotions, that something was amiss. Well, Team 7, you are in luck. One of the Chunin has been injured, and will require medical treatment. His injuries are severe enough that the team's medic Nin cannot completely heal him. He will have to be brought back to the hospital. You are to escort the team of medics to the site, meet up with this team, and your team will support the other two Chunin in their task of border patrol. This is a mid-sea ranked mission, and there may be contact with enemy ninja in non-combat situations. Will you accept this mission? The three looked at Ibiki-sensei and nodded. Ibiki, in turn said, we accept this mission. When will the medic team be ready to leave? They will leave by noon. That gives you 4 hours to prepare and meet them at the hospital entrance. Bring enough supplies for a 2-week stay. That is all. Hi, Hokage-sama, the three genin said in unison. End flashback. Naruto studied himself in the mirror. His off-white, almost cream-colored jacket would not blend well in the green of the trees he would be patrolling in. He smiled and reached into his closet to pull out his new outfit he had recently acquired. Flashback. Again. The day before their meeting with the Hokage, Naruto was taking a couple hours to relax. Not content in the stuffy Hyuga compound, he decided that he would go shopping. Strange thing for a man to do. In any case, mostly he just browsed the vendors that had set their wares up on the side streets. There were some interesting trinkets, but unfortunately for both Naruto and the vendors, the Hyuga pride had really begun to rub off on Naruto. These things are only semi-precious stones set in common metal. Not something a Hyuga should wear. Soon, he decided to visit a weapons shop. Usually, he went to the one that was run by Tenten's family, as she was a good friend of Neji Ni-san. Today, however, his eyes were caught by a different store. He entered the small shop and subtly admired the decent display of weapons around the walls and aisles. What really caught his eye was the glass counter and what was held inside it. The sign on top of the counter read, "Customized forehead protectors available here." Naruto was instantly intrigued. The owner of the store was, rather unfortunately, one of the few people that didn't believe the Sandaime when he announced Naruto's heritage and the fact that Kyuubi was no longer part of this world. However, this was offset by the fact that Naruto was not only a main branch member of the esteemed Hyuga clan, but also held in high regards by Hiyashi-sama. Excuse me, sir, but how much would it be to customize a headband from scratch? After a moment of mental debating, the shop owner replied in a rather neutral voice. That depends on what you want to put on it. Naruto nodded and took a moment to think. Then I would like to purchase one. The man nodded and pulled out a slip of paper. And what would you like to put on it? First, I want the metal blackened and unable to reflect light. Next, carve the leaf symbol to the left side of it and the Hyuga flames on the right. The only shine should be in the carvings themselves. The shop owner wrote down the instructions and mentally tallied up the price. The price will be, approximately 8,950 ryu. Naruto dug out his wallet, thankfully not Gama-chan this time. He pulled out a 10,000 ryu note and handed it to the man, who got his change and handed it back. Before Naruto left the store, he asked the man one final question. When is the soonest I can it up? Ah, for another 1,000 ryu, I can have it finished by 6 o'clock tonight. Naruto smiled and flipped him 2 500 ryu coins, which the man caught before smiling and wishing him a good day. Naruto was in a particularly good mood, and decided to stop by a ninja outfit store that had been highly praised by several branch members. Apparently, the shop was new in town, and the owner was from Wind Country. He had a fair amount of interesting outfits in a style from an ancient civilization known as the Pashan. Making his way across town, he finally stopped by the store. Before he went in, his eyes were yet again drawn to a window display. The mannequin that stood there had on the outfit that had caught Naruto's eye. It was completely black, and didn't reflect any light whatsoever. The pants looked to be skin tight, but were in fact quite comfortable, and near the bottoms of the legs it seemed to be tied by black bandages. The shirt was very much the same, but only the arms were tied. The pants and the shirt were held by a black sash that was barely visible, but seemed adjustable. The entire head of the mannequin was wrapped and the only place showing was a small slit for the eyes. Each of the wrapped areas had tails at least a foot long that Naruto could imagine would flutter quite intimidatingly in a slight breeze. It almost looked like shadows were rolling off the outfit, giving it an extremely cool look. Imagine the Sand Wraith Prince, from Prince of Persia, warrior within, only with a wrapped head instead of a mask. Naruto instantly went into the store and had his measurements taken for an outfit identical to the one he saw. He paid the shopkeeper a rather sizable tip to have it finished by nightfall, and of course the man complied, as he did not have too many orders at the moment. This was only his first week open for business, and word had not spread around to overwhelm him with orders. Naruto did, however, take the long piece of cloth used to tie his head up before leaving the store. Making his way back to the weapons shop, he instructed the man to put the customized headband on the black cloth so that it would be on Naruto's forehead when he wore his outfit. Looking around the weapons shop again, as it was around 5:30 already, Naruto decided to stay until his headband was finished. Strangely enough, today seemed like a rather compulsive day for Naruto, as his eye was again caught by something. A small black box was sitting in the corner of a room. A thin layer of dust covered it as it had not been opened in a while. Carefully lifting the lid up, Naruto peeked inside. In black velvet, there sat two of the most exotic weapons Naruto had ever seen, along with an old-looking scroll. The weapons themselves were familiar to Naruto, as they were merely a short sword and a dagger. It was the fact that they were both strangely shaped that caught Naruto's eyes. Both were completely black, but they had silver accents along the handle and guards. The hilts were inlaid with obsidian stones that seemed to shine with an inner darkness. Strange as it sounded, it's the only way Naruto could describe it. Naruto grinned his true grin. It wasn't the stuck-up Hyuga, "I'm better than you," smirk, nor was it the, "I'm completely happy, nothing is wrong," grin he had used as a child. This was a foxy grin that, should anyone have seen it, would have made people shudder at the killing intent behind it. Naruto was imagining himself in his new outfit, wielding these strange-looking weapons. He assumed that the scroll was a learning course on how to wield them properly, and he guessed correctly. Glancing at the clock above the counter, he picked up the box and headed back to the register to await the store owner. Several minutes after 6 o'clock, the man finally stepped out of the back room, holding the customized forehead protector that Naruto had purchased. The man was smiling to himself as he saw the box, thinking, finally, someone takes an interest in those weapons. I was beginning to think no one would buy them. Let's see if I can't drive the price up a bit. Ah, I see you've found something that caught your eyes. Yes, I have. The two spent nearly an hour haggling a price, and the icy Hyuga glare no jutsu that Naruto used was rather effective. Gotta thank Neji for teaching me that one, thought Naruto as he paid a decent 16,500 ryu for the box and its contents. He, I doubled the money I spent buying this from that traveler. Life sure is good, especially when rich people are involved. The shopkeeper was grinning happily as Naruto left the shop with his purchases, heading back to the cloth store to pick up his outfit before finally going back to the Hyuga manor and almost literally falling into bed, fatigued from a long day of shopping. Damn it, where's Naruto? He's usually not the late one. Hinata is missing too, an annoyed Ibiki paced in front of the hospital. The medics and Choji fidgeted, completely aware of how testy Ibiki was when annoyed. One of the medics had to patch up a POW that Ibiki had interrogated on a bad day, and she shuddered at the memory. To put it lightly, the skin was hanging off the man's face by a whisker, quite literally. Hinata landed in the middle of the group and self-consciously brushed the dust off of her usual training cloths. Gomen, everyone. Naruto told me to go ahead. He said he'd be a few minutes behind me. He was still in his room when I left. Ibiki sighed before speaking. It's okay, Hinata. He'll be here soon, I hope. At that moment, a figure seemed to melt out of the shadows. Shadows seemed to roll off of him and mix with the ends of the black bandages that floated around him, despite the fact that there was no wind at all that day. A small dagger was at his right hip and a hilt was visible over his left shoulder. In my FIC, Naruto is gonna be left-handed, like me. 2 black shuriken and kunai holsters were tied to the man's legs, as a usual ninjas were. The head was completely wrapped, only the eyes showing. 3 strands of blonde hair partially obscured the man's left eye through the slit between the wrappings. The sight was so intimidating that killer intent rolled off the man, despite the fact that he wasn't consciously emitting any. Everyone there seemed to freeze up, except for Ibiki, who was used to these things. They half relaxed at the sight of the modified Konoha forehead protector with the Hyuga symbol next to it, but still kept their guard. Nice to see you, Naruto. I'm liking the new outfit. Ibiki said, dispelling the tension immediately. Naruto put a hand behind his head, and a grin was visible behind the mask, as his eyes curled into their upside-down, shape, much like Kakashi's. It's not too much, is it? Hinata blushed because the suit showed off Naruto's well-toned body. Choji just grinned and kept munching his chips. Ibiki grinned in malicious pleasure as he said, "It's great. I'd be useful to be able to intimidate this much during interrogation without even trying." Ibiki drifted off, many of his favorite interrogation techniques running through his head. Thanks, Ibiki-sensei. Anyway, I'm ready to go. He shifted the pack on his back, also colored black. It blended well into his form, so much that it wasn't even apparent he was wearing one only after he shifted it. The small genjutsu on it helped as well. The group ran across the rooftops of Konoha and into the tops of the trees after they passed the gates. For almost the rest of the day they ran. Luckily, they had packed light, so they weren't too fatigued to set up a decent camp. That night, they took shifts watching and sleeping as they were nearing the border, and to watch for bandits. The next morning they set out as early as possible. Few words were said in trade of better efficiency in their work. Small hand signs were their only communication as they ran. They ate lunch on the go, opting for highly nutritious and surprisingly tasty field rations and water from their canteens. Around 3 or 4 in the afternoon, they reached rendezvous. The 2 uninjured Chunin were guarding the injured one, and jumped as the group entered the clearing. State your name and your business with us, one said, while drawing a kunai. Morino Ibiki, I'm the Junin instructor for Team 7, and we're escorting the medic team and replacing your downed comrade for the duration of his recovery or until another can replace us. Here are our documents. Ibiki slowly pulled out the specially sealed scroll and tossed it to the men. After they made sure it wasn't trapped, they're on the border and have an injured comrade, not to mention outnumbered already. They're being very cautious. They opened it and read it, confirming Ibiki's report. They relaxed slightly, and the medics moved to treat the injured man. What are your usual patterns? Ibiki asked the team leader. After they were explained to Team 7, the Genin team and their sensei took off to take over the patrol until the other 2 had a chance to rest, namely until tomorrow morning. The day was rather uneventful, consisting of little more than moving through the treetops and undergrowth about 2 miles back from the border, looking for any intruders. Hinata's Byakugan was more than helpful in their task, and the group didn't have to risk being revealed to look through rather thick branches or overgrown bushes. Naruto's bloodline was just as effective, but he didn't detect any human chakra other than their own and that of the Chunin patrollers. For the next week and a half, Team 7 fell into the rhythm of their mission, eventually earning the respect of the 2 Chunin. The 2 had asked to spar with them, but found that they were on the same level as Hinata and Choji. In other words, it was a long, hard sparring session between them, but it all came down to endurance. Here, Choji shone, while Hinata had to consume an almost dangerous amount of soldier pills. In the end, Choji won, but Hinata only tied. The two didn't even want to try to take on Ibiki, and Naruto looked much more intimidating than the interrogation specialist. Eventually, they started taking shifts for their patrolling. The Chunin would patrol from sunrise to about 3 in the afternoon. They would return to camp and eat with the just waking group 2, which were Ibiki and Choji. They would, in turn, patrol from 3 until around a little after nightfall. Then, they would return to camp and eat, only to be replaced by Hinata and Naruto. They would then take their turn patrolling until around sunrise, when they would return to camp and wake the two Chunin and eat breakfast. Right now, Naruto and Hinata were just waking up for their 3 o'clock lunch. Naruto yawned and stretched, using a combination of a low-level Suiten Jutsu and a low-level Kaden Jutsu to make himself a hot shower outside the camp a ways. Now, usually one wouldn't think that a Hyuga would be well, they will never be called that, but let's just say that Hinata seemed to take after Jiraiya. With the Byakugan, it was more than easy to peek in on Naruto taking a shower. Ibiki knew what she was doing, but the others were still confused about her getting red in the face and springing a small nosebleed each and every morning, but they stopped worrying about it after the first few days. Naruto, of course, had no idea he was being spied on. Drying himself off, Naruto dressed and entered the camp. After a decent breakfast, the Chunin went to bed, Ibiki and Choji left to go on patrol, and Naruto and Hinata stayed behind. This was Hinata's favorite time of the day. Her and Naruto could be alone from now until nightfall, and they usually spent it talking, sparring, working on jutsu, or just sitting quietly. Now was one of their quiet moments. Hinata was, of course, in a mental battle. Come on, just gotta come out and say it, no, I'll look dumb. I gotta get him in the mood, but what if he gets uncomfortable? I just gotta do it. Come on, say it. Naruto, never mind. Why can't I just do it? Naruto, of course, had a much different thought process. I wonder when she'll tell me. I mean, come on, I'm not really that dense. There are only so many things I can ignore. I was taught the Hyuga art of facial reading, there's only so much I can take. I swear, as soon as this mission is over, I'm going to take her out, maybe that'll get her to confess. Kami-sama, this is driving me nuts. Damn it all. I'm just going to tell her I know. Hinata, Naruto's voice trailed off as a large explosion could be heard in the distance. They both turned to the direction it came from to see a large pillar of dust and smoke rise over the tree tops. The two instantly jumped into the branches and started making their way to the battlefield. Dun. Lol. Halo here. Sorry about the cliffhanger. A little bit of fluff there. I'm not very good at it, though, bear with me, I'm still exploring the world of literature. Anyways, sorry about the wait on this. School has been boring, but I still have homework. Senioritis has set in, meaning, I'm getting lazier and lazier each day. Not that I wasn't lazy before, but now I make Shikamaru look active. Lol. Although, I do like a good game of shogi every once in a while. I'm still not very good. I can't even win one game against the computer on the easiest difficulty and all the handicaps giving me the advantage. Yeah, meh, oh well. Thanks for reading, review. Here's rumbling in the background, only to see a crowd of eager readers and some yaoi fangirls attracted by the filler. I'll post right away, don't kill me, takes off running.